Welcome to the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah Rosensweet, mom of 3 young people, peaceful parenting coach, and your cheerleader and guide on all things parenting. Each week, we'll cover the tools, strategies, and support you need to end the yelling and power struggles and encourage your kids to listen and cooperate so that you can enjoy your family time. I'm happy to say we have a great relationship with our 3 kids. The teen years have been easy and joyful, not because we're special unicorns, but because my kids were raised with peaceful parenting. I've also helped so many parents just like you stop struggling and enjoy their kids again. I'm excited to be here with you today and bring you the insight and information you need to make your parenting journey a little more peaceful. Let's dive into this week's conversation. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Peaceful Parenting Podcast. Today's episode is actually not really the Peaceful Parenting Podcast, although I'm sharing it here with you. It's a workshop that I gave about the keys to being a successful, peaceful parent. And I finished the workshop today and I felt really great about it. And I thought, wow, I should really share this on the podcast. It was a video workshop, so I had slides that went with it. If you want an enhanced experience, you might want to pop over to my YouTube channel and watch it there so that you can see the visuals that go along with what I'm talking about. I do think it'll make sense if you just listen to the audio, but if you do want to see the slides, you should pop over to my YouTube channel to watch it. We talked about the keys that ended up being 10 keys to being a successful, peaceful parent, and I was not talking about the tools that you need to do peaceful parenting. There's a lot of information about that out there, and the problem is if you just have the tools without the scaffolding or understanding that goes underneath using the tools, you can either get it wrong and have sort of a misinterpretation of what peaceful parenting is, or it doesn't work. It doesn't quote work how it is supposed to work. So it's really important to have these keys. And there are things that I find, I put this together because I find that people are not talking about this. The people who are out there on social media, I mentioned this in the workshop, but I really feel that there is a bit of a backlash going on to peaceful parenting. And it's because it's gone mainstream. And it's because there are so many people talking about it on social media who don't understand what it is or what these keys are. So sit back, check out the YouTube if you do want to see the slides and see my face, and find out about the keys to being a successful, peaceful parent. At the end, I also talk about my Peaceful Parenting membership, which you can join. There will be more about that so that you just know what it is. I would just like to tell you about it real quick here, because as of April 5th, the price is going up. It's been the same price for the last 5 years. And in order to continue delivering the amazing content and support we have inside of the membership, I am going to raise the price. It's currently $37 a month. It's going up to $57 a month. So if you'd like to check out the membership, and if you choose to join us, you will be locked in at $37 a month. You can go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership. We have group coaching every week, twice a week inside the membership. We have monthly content on a theme. This month coming up for April is aggression. And I know that is something that a lot of you find challenging with your kids when they get aggressive. So we're going to be doing a deep dive into aggression and how to manage it, how to stop it. We're going to have a guest expert on that theme. Some of you might know Tasha Shore of Out With Aggression. She's going to be our guest expert. And as always, we have a library of peaceful parenting lessons inside the membership. But really, it's about community, and it's about support. And you get access to me and to Corey to answer your questions. Somebody described it as a peaceful parenting coach in your back pocket. Another person described it as parenting insurance. And I love that. So go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership to check out the membership and to join us and get locked in at the current rate before we raise the rates on April 5th, or after April 5th is the last day to join. So after April 5th, the rates will be higher. Okay, let's check out the workshop, the keys to peaceful parenting success. And again, if you would like to see the slides, hop over to my YouTube channel. We've got the video up there for you. Welcome, everyone. So we're talking today about the keys to being a successful, peaceful parent. And when I say successful, I think that, that's in quotes. We're not perfectionists. We're not the peaceful parenting police here. So successful just means like reaching your goals, right? How to be the parent that you want to be and reach your goals. If you don't know me, I'm Sarah Rosensweet, peaceful parenting coach, mom of 3. Some of you are here because you are part of the free 5-day challenge. Some of you are here just because I invited everyone to join us for this. Today is going to be more just general action steps for people, keys to peaceful parenting. So today, what we're going to be talking about super briefly, what is peaceful parenting? So we're all on the same page. Why are we even needing to talk about this? And I'm going to go over, it was very handy that ended up being 10 keys to being a successful parent. I didn't have a number in mind when I started, but it turned out to be a nice round, even number. And then we're going to be talking about the Peaceful Parenting membership, which is my paid membership. I just want to be super upfront that I'm going to be telling you about that at the end. I kind of hate it when I join workshops and then it turns out that the person is making an offer at the end and I didn't know about it. Even if you don't take me up on the offer, what I'm going to be teaching you today is standalone helpful. So it's not that, it's not that it's all about the offer, although I do hope you to take me up on the offer. So real quick, peaceful parenting is three big ideas. A focus on parental self-regulation, which is what we talked about all week during the challenge, the Parents Cool Your Jet challenge. A focus on connection and the relationship. A relationship is really the only true influence we have with another person. It's really the only true way we can influence somebody. And then the third big idea, this may be new language for you because we used to say kind, firm limits with no punishment. And now we're saying, or consequences, whatever you want to call it. Now we're talking about a focus on teamwork and collaboration instead of consequences. And I'm going to explain that shift a little bit in some of the keys that we're talking about today, because I do feel like it helps you a lot more to intend, instead of thinking about limits, thinking about collaboration. I want to say that we're not focusing on the tools of peaceful parenting today. The tools of peaceful parenting are important. How do you get kids to cooperate? How do you get kids to listen? How can you use playfulness to avoid power struggles? Keeping calm, that would be considered tools in the toolkit. Basically, the tools of peaceful parenting are what we have replaced the conventional parenting tools with. So conventional parenting tools are using consequences, threats, bribes, fear, making kids feel bad. Those are what conventional parenting uses to move through the day and get kids to be on our agenda or to do what we want them to do. If you drop those out, you do need to replace them with another set of tools. And those are the peaceful parenting tools. If you just drop out using fear-based discipline and don't replace it with something else, you're lost. And the tools are super important. And that I have written here, connection gives us more than 18 years with our parents, with our children. This is a picture from last year, March break, where we went to visit my dad. This year, just my daughter and I are going. But my sons were on reading week from university, and they chose to come with us for a family vacation, even though they were 19 and 23 at the time. So it really is that, when you do have this relationship with your kids, you do get more than 18 years with your kids because of peaceful parenting. So I just want to say the tools are really important and getting through the day-to-day is really important. And this is the issue though. Peaceful parenting is about more than the toolbox. It's a way of life, right? So it's a new way of thinking about your relationship with your kids. It's a new way of thinking about discipline. Discipline, I don't have I don't have a problem with the word, except for the word usually means punishment. So we really want to think about discipline as teaching. And, peaceful parenting is a way of life. It's a new way of thinking. It's a new way of approaching a relationship with children. And I've had people tell me that when they have, gotten into peaceful parenting, it's improved their relationship. It's improved their relationship with their partner. It's improved their relationship with I have a client who is a dentist, and she told me that peaceful parenting is making her a better dentist. So it really is a way of life. It's a different way of looking at relationships. However, there are some keys of success that a lot of people don't talk about. And social media can be a blessing and a curse. So social media, this is just a shot from my Instagram when I searched up the hashtag peaceful parenting. Peaceful parenting has gone mainstream in a lot of ways. And the problem with that, so a lot of people are like, isn't that good that so many people know about it and so many more people are doing it? The problem is though, is that on social media, and I've really stepped back from social media because I find this frustrating. Social media does not allow for nuance, right? There's a lot of nuance involved in peaceful parenting. Social media doesn't allow for nuance. Social media shows like little snapshots that don't show the scaffolding behind what we're doing, right? They don't show the deeper changes. It might show, a parent who is responding to a child who's, hitting, and these are on a lot of the memes that I've seen that are making fun of peaceful parenting or gentle parenting, and it makes the parent look really ineffectual, right? And sometimes, there are times where we might quote look ineffectual or look permissive, but it's because we are understanding that our child, has reached their limit for IKEA and a meltdown is unavoidable. And it's not because we're tolerating bad behavior, it's because we understand child development and we know that our expectations might have been unreasonable. So peaceful parenting going mainstream has given a lot of people the wrong idea about peaceful parenting, which is what I'm trying to correct today with looking at the keys to peaceful parenting that are not talked about as much, that people are maybe even not aware of about these keys. But I've been doing this for a long time. My oldest son, I mentioned, is 24. I've been coaching parents for over 12 years. I've been doing this for a very long time, and I've seen what makes peaceful parenting successful and what is lacking sometimes. So again, but missing the nuance, misunderstanding, not seeing the scaffolding, that is really what's difficult about peaceful parenting having gone mainstream. And I saw the same thing happen with attachment parenting back in the day with it, it started out great idea and all these ways to promote attachment with a parent and child, but it got exaggerated, made fun of, misunderstood until I remember my dad's a psychologist and he told me that he had a client, this couple who had a toddler, and they hadn't let anyone else take care of the child ever because the mother said she was practicing attachment parenting, and to her that meant that nobody else except for the parent could ever watch the child, right? So these things can get twisted. Peaceful parenting is a way of life, and a lot of it gets missed on social media. So let's talk about this is the first of our keys. This is one you've probably heard me talk about before, but I just had to include it. The first two are ones you probably heard me talk about before, but because they are so important, I'm going to include it. So our mindset, we have to have the mindset that kids want to be good and that they're doing the best they can. If you don't have this mindset, if you don't believe in your heart that children are doing the best they can and they want to be good, it will be very hard for you not to move into a punishment frame of mind when your child is acting up. So that's what I see as a big stumbling block for a lot of parents, is that when we talked a lot in the challenge this week about mantras and that there are things that you know to be true when you're not dysregulated or when you're not hijacked. This is one of those things. That when you are not hijacked, you might believe, or when you're, in your rational mind, you might believe, yeah, I know kids want to be good and that they're doing the best they can. But to believe it in your core is to be able to hold on to it when things are tough, right? So how do we know this? How do we know that they want to be good and they're doing the best they can? As humans, we are dependent. We are born vulnerable and not able to survive on our own. We depend on connection. Our brains are actually hardwired for connection with a caregiver. And if we didn't have that connection, we wouldn't survive. So, if the fires came, they would leave us on a rock if they didn't care about us, right? Our caregivers. So we are hardwired to seek connection and to be in a state of connection with our caregivers or with people that we love. If we're acting like jerks, or if our kids are acting like jerks and, really what feels like giving us a hard time, it's because there's something else going on, right? They're doing the best they can, but there's something else going on. They're low on resources. You've got a new baby. They are, trying to get a need met and they're not being very effective at it. So really the first key is really understanding that kids want to be good and they're doing the best they can. The second key, again, you've heard me talk about this before if you've been with me for a while, is to have self-compassion when you mess up. Again, I have never seen anyone do the work that they want to do and be the peaceful parent they want to do by being hard on themselves. And this can be really tricky because sometimes, especially if we weren't raised with peaceful parenting, if we were raised with a lot of reactivity or in neglectful or abusive situations, if we were raised with parents who yelled or hit or shamed, it can be very difficult to not revert to that when we are it ourselves. So some of us may have done things that we feel really regretful about, embarrassed about, and it can be very difficult. Make sure they're muted. I'm just gonna mute that. I'll mute that person there. It can be really difficult when we've done something that we feel horrible about to give ourselves compassion. And I do want to tell you that beating yourself up will make you more reactive, right? Beating yourself up it's like if your child is having a hard time, you start yelling at them. I mean, it's possible they'll shut down because they're scared. but often kids' behavior gets worse when we are not understanding and not compassionate with them. And it's the same with us. It makes us more reactive in the moment to, be beating ourselves up when we're in the middle of a grown up meltdown or tantrum. And also after the fact, if we are going back and being hard on ourselves, that actually makes us more tense and more reactive going forward. Research really shows that self compassion is the way to improve. If you're interested in that research, look at Kristen Neff. She is somebody who's done a lot of research about self compassion, and it helps athletes. It helps anyone who are doing hard things and sometimes fail. And parenting is one of those hard things at which you will sometimes fail. So remind yourself you can't do better by feeling worse. And I love this phrase. So what happens sometimes is we have constructed an idea of ourselves as worthy only when we are, acting nicely, when we don't make mistakes, when we're doing everything well. Through how we were raised and through our culture, we've constructed this ideal of ourselves as like, I'm worthy and lovable when all of these conditions are met, right? What we're trying to do in peaceful parenting and with ourselves is to let our kids know you're worthy and lovable even when you dump the cat food on the floor or even when, yell that I'm the worst parent in the world, right? You're still worthy. Our child is still worthy and lovable. Nobody has to earn love when they're born. We're born deserving love and expecting love. Same for you. You are worthy and lovable, even if you mess up, even if, yell at your kids 5 times. And the phrase to help us with developing that self-compassion is, even though I yelled at my child 5 times today, I'm still worthy and lovable. Those two things are the opposite of a Venn diagram. They're both existing at the same time, right? Or maybe they would be a Venn diagram within the middle of self-compassion. I'll have to think about that. I love Venn diagrams. So both of those things are true at once. You are worthy and lovable, even though you acted in a way that you wish you hadn't. And some people will say at this point, well, aren't I just letting myself off the hook? Like I have clients that I work with who have such a hard time with this concept because they feel like if they forgive themselves, if they give themselves compassion, they're letting themselves off the hook for bad behavior. This is the thing. You don't have to cause yourself pain to do better because this is so important to you that being the parent that you want to be is so important to you. Your kids are probably the most important thing in your life, right? Most important thing to you in your life. And there was something else I was going to say about that. If you are truly letting yourself off the hook, you probably wouldn't be on this call right now. Somebody who's truly letting themselves off the hook is somebody who does nothing to try to improve their how they are with their kids or their self-regulation. If you're trying to improve and you give yourself compassion and you're actively working on it, that is not letting yourself off the hook. Next one. This one is something that I haven't talked about very much. Well, it might be a new idea to you, but one key to peaceful parenting, successful peaceful parenting, is combating our own adult centrism. What do I mean by that? So our world or our culture in North America is generally very adult centric. So what that means is that needs and preferences of adults are centered over the needs and preferences of children. So peaceful parenting doesn't mean that we flip the script. When we are battling our own adult centrism, it doesn't mean that we flip into the needs and preferences of children are now at the top of the list and ours are below them. It means that we see ourselves as equals. And I don't mean that children are our equals in that they don't need guidance and they don't need leadership. They absolutely do need guidance and leadership. However, they deserve to be seen as fully human and that their needs matter and their preferences matter and the things that they care about matter, right? So oftentimes we do things because our way is faster or easier, or we just plain old like our idea better. And that is something that is very acceptable in mainstream parenting. Even, an example, this was a couple of years ago now, but it really stood out to me as a perfect example, which was my father, who is a really generally very, peaceful person and was a great role model. But he does fall into this, he's 70, how old is he? 76, 7. He does fall into adult centric viewpoint sometimes. So my sister was visiting with her daughter and she had children later in life. So she has actually currently a 7-year-old and she was visiting my dad. And I think her daughter was 4 at the time, maybe. And they were going to my sister wanted a coffee at like the coffee shop and my dad was driving and he was going to pull over in front of the coffee shop for my sister to run in and get a coffee. And her daughter wanted to come in with her. all it would have involved was unbuckling the kid from the car seat and getting her out of the car and bringing her in. And my sister actually was happy to do that. But my dad had decided to put his foot down about it because he thought it was silly and inconvenient to take my niece into the coffee shop. So he sort of put his foot down and said, no, you don't need to go in. Your mother's just going to run in quickly and get the coffee. And sometimes maybe that would have made sense if it was too hard to stop and too hard to get out, but it was one of those situations she could have gotten out very easily. And my poor sister felt very trapped between what her daughter wanted and what her father was saying. We still do fall into that where we want to listen. Okay. So that's a perfect example. It's a small example, but it's a perfect example of adult centrism at work. Easier for the adult's opinion, the kid should stay in the car and not go in. So we really have to think about where that pops up. We do love our own ideas. We do love our own agendas. I love this years ago when I was teaching the stop, drop, and breathe, our pause button for self-regulation. One of the drop is to drop your agenda. And often just for a minute while you're getting yourself back online. But I had a parent who commented, dropping my agenda is really hard for me because I often feel that my agenda is really awesome. I think that's key, right? We often get very attached to our own agenda, but trying to see children as fully human, they matter. We listen to them. We try to take their needs and preferences into account. And again, it doesn't mean that we're always sacrificing ourselves and putting them above us, but that we recognize how adult centrism works in our culture. And we're aware of that. The next slide. This is slightly related. And this is why I mentioned in the beginning that we've stopped talking about limits as our third big idea of peaceful parenting. We used to say kind, firm limits was our third big idea. And we've really stopped. Corey and I actually did a podcast episode about this. If you're interested, it was, I don't know, maybe about 2 months ago. If anyone can't find it, just shoot me an email and I'll help you find it. But we actually did a podcast episode where we talked about this in a lot more detail. So what I like to call sugar-coated control is when we use the excuse of limits to get our way, and we're just nicer about it. So it can be that, I'll give you an example. I read this on someone else's, a parenting coach's Facebook page that a parent, it wasn't in my community, it was in a different community. A parent was sharing their win about how, and again, no judgment. We're all learning and this may be a brand new idea for some people, and you may hear this example and it might resonate with you. But what I'm afraid of is when we talk about kind, firm limits, it's just an excuse to get our own way. So this example was a mother had shared the win that she was able to empathize with her child when they were upset, which is a great win. But when you hear the reason was that her toddler, she just finished cutting her toddler's fingernails, and the toddler wanted to hold the fingernail clippers. I don't know about your fingernail clippers, but my toddler fingernail clippers, or even my adult ones, I guess as long as they don't have that little file built in, are not dangerous. You can't really hurt yourself on fingernail clippers. But this parent had gotten in their head that they didn't want the child to hold or look at the fingernail clippers. And so they wrestled them out of their child's hand. And then the win was that they were able to empathize with their child, who was very upset that they'd taken away the fingernail clippers. Empathy is great when your child's upset, but if it's because of a limit that you've unnecessarily set, that's sugar-coated control. So you're like, I'm being kind and empathetic about this because you're upset, but it really is it's like my friend Vivek Patel says, peaceful parenting is not conventional parenting done more nicely. So that's something that you do really want to watch out for is, am I just using, quote, limit setting? That's why we've shifted to collaboration and teamwork. Because when we talk about limit setting, that can be a slippery slope, right? When you think about a limit, the limit is you can't have the fingernail clippers. Well, is that a limit that, I don't want to get too deep into the tools, but is that a limit that is necessary, developmentally appropriate health or safety limit? So just that's something that is a key, is to just really watch out for this. I've hinted at this, but another key, this is something that I see a lot with influencers talking about how if you do peaceful parenting or gentle parenting, your needs don't count. And it's always about dropping everything for the child, and that you never, you're in a big complaint that people have about peaceful parenting is that it's exhausting. It is more work than conventional parenting. I will not argue about that. It is much harder to get a child on board with something that needs to happen than it is to threaten taking away screen time. Oh, this is a really interesting, this is an aside. Sorry, my ADHD makes me really go on tangents sometimes, but I think you will find this interesting. I have some clients who decided that they wanted to take away their kids' iPads for a little while because they felt like it was starting, they were getting obsessed with all day. When can I do my games? When can I do my games? And they just decided that they wanted to do a break for a few weeks from iPad games. They were still doing, TV shows and stuff, but they really felt like the iPad games were starting to cause a lot of problems in their family. And they reported a very, again, this has nothing to do with your needs, but I forget even why I started to say this, but I think it's an interesting story. They found that when they couldn't, oh, right, because it's easier to take away the threatened screen time and get cooperation. They found when they weren't letting their kids do their iPads, they were much better peaceful parents because they didn't have the threat of they weren't even tempted. Sometimes, they didn't want to use the threat of we'll take away your iPad if you don't do this. But since that was completely off the table, they found they had to be more creative and more thoughtful. And I thought that was super interesting that, they recognized that it was their default mode was to think, oh, to get them to cooperate, I'm going to take away their iPad. So it is a lot more work. Of course, threatening to take away the iPad is probably going to get you pretty quick results. But you just have to ask yourself, what is the reason that child is doing that? So back to your needs, it is a lot of work to do peaceful parenting. It requires a lot of thoughtfulness on our part. It requires a lot of being conscious of our own triggers, something we worked on this week in the Cool Your Jets challenge. It requires more patience, answering lots of questions. It is harder, and your needs count. And if you don't put yourself on your to-do list, that's part of our recipe for calm that we talked about this week in the Cool Your Jets challenge. If you don't put yourself on your to-do list, you're going to get burnt out, you're going to get exhausted, and it's going to be really hard to do peaceful parenting anyways. So you might as well put yourself on there, think about what you need, and find ways to get your needs met. I had one thing we talked about in the recording from yesterday, you might want to go back and listen to it if you're interested, is about if you're feeling resentful, it's often a sign that you need to do some reparenting. I like to connect the RE and the RE, and that reparenting is looking at whether or not your needs were met as a child and why you're still waiting for people to meet your needs. Okay. Another key to peaceful parenting, being a successful peaceful parent, is managing your own anxiety because this is a long game. So there might be times where it looks very messy, right? You've got little kids or even kids who are, still learning and their brains are still developing. And it might look like, quote, bad behavior, might look like messy feelings. It might, if you have a 6-year-old that's hitting, I just was talking to somebody yesterday in a free consult whose 6-year-old was hitting. And I said, one of the keys here to managing aggression is to remind yourself this is a moment in time, right? It is not, because your 6-year-old's hitting, it doesn't mean they're going to be hitting at 12 or 18, or they're going to turn into a person who hits their partner. But our own anxiety can spin us into that catastrophic future when things aren't going well. This is not the playoffs, right? It's not everything, you're either your kid's going to turn out great or not based on one day. So it is a long game. And that's why we really need to manage our own anxiety, because that long game, sometimes there are ups and downs in that long game the downs can feel difficult, and it can feel like, oh, what am I even doing? My neighbor's kids are so well behaved, and they're parented conventionally and they're really well behaved, and maybe I'm making a giant mistake. If you're interested, there's a woman, she has a book called How to Raise Kids Who Aren't Blankety Blanks, but she actually says the name of it. She's a New York Times, and she's a freelance journalist, but I first found out about her because I saw an article that she wrote in the New York Times my dad actually sent it to me. And it was something like, it's okay if your kid is a little bit of a jerk. Like, that was the headline. And it was basically about how children who are raised with what the research calls authoritative parenting, which is peaceful parenting, or the closest thing to it, are often not afraid of grownups. And so they might have, quote, bad behavior around you because they're not afraid of being punished. And so sometimes what is developing impulse control, what is developing self-regulation, what is a child just being immature, it can make you doubt if you're doing the right thing. So just remember, those moments are a moment in time. And if you are following the tools of peaceful parenting and the mindset, all these keys, it is an approach that works. I have my own 3 kids to to stand by, and then also decades of research about authoritative parenting. You can look that up yourself if you want to. And another great person who puts together a lot of research about not using punishments is Alfie Kohn, who wrote a book called Unconditional Parenting, which has tons of research in the back of it. So really just remember, this is a long game, and those tough moments don't mean that it's not working. And so really managing your own anxiety. Co-regulate. So co-regulation is where you go when you're having those tough moments. Focusing. So I said co-regulate, and co-regulate actually means that when you're calm, somebody else can feel you're calm. It's been said that the two most contagious emotions are calm and panic, right? Our nervous systems are always talking to each other. So co-regulation is the process of your nervous system picking up on somebody else's nervous system cues of either regulation or dysregulation, and vice versa. So when things are hard, a key is to focus on calming yourself. That's one thing we did that in a lot of detail in the challenge this week. But a key is to focus on calming yourself. There might not be anything else you can do when you're having a difficult moment, but focusing on calming yourself is huge. And it can be really hard to do, as I mentioned, the anxiety and our own regulation challenges. But really putting a lot of energy into that is something that, you don't see that nuance on social media. You don't see that nuance in some of the, influencers who are good at making videos, but don't have much experience or training in teaching peaceful parenting. Let's see. I think we have 3 more maybe. Okay. The Goodwill Bank. You may have heard me talking about this before, or maybe not. Maybe this is a brand new concept to you. This is a concept that I developed, and it's something that it's obviously a metaphor for our relationship. Maybe not obviously what it's a metaphor for, but I'm not really talking about a piggy bank. It's a metaphor for our relationship with our child. So over time, we are going to either be making deposits or withdrawals of the Goodwill Bank into the Goodwill Bank. So if we have a nice big beefy bank filled with lots of deposits, those withdrawals are going to be less painful and easier for a child to understand and tolerate. So ways that we put deposits in the Goodwill Bank, things that I've already mentioned, being flexible, not being arbitrary, controlling, and power tripping, focusing on connection. A lot of the tools of peaceful parenting, which isn't the scope of our workshop today, a lot of those tools are ways that we're putting deposits into that Goodwill Bank, right? Being trustworthy, doing what you say you're going to do, being honest, much the same as what you would look for in somebody that you really respect and admire. What do they do that makes you respect and admire them? What do they do that increases your sense of goodwill towards them? Withdrawals from the Goodwill Bank, sometimes you can't avoid it, because sometimes there are limits that we need to set that our child will experience as a withdrawal, right? You're not allowed to go to the party. That's something that might come up when you have older kids, teenagers. I don't think the party is a good idea, and you're not, I don't give you permission to go. If your child has experienced you through their whole lives for example, you're not going to get an iPhone until you're 14, or you can't have that social media app or whatever. And as you notice, those examples are older kid examples. And that's really when you start to feel the Goodwill Bank, is when you have to tell your child something that they don't like, but because they've had a whole lifetime of experiencing you as trustworthy and connected and taking their needs and preferences into account, they're going to be much more likely to trust that you know what you're doing and that it's for a reason, even if they don't like it or understand it. So we are always, and I would say, I guess other withdrawals that we might make are our own challenges of self-regulation, of yelling, times when we slip and maybe use a punishment when we know better, when we're regulated. And by the way, don't be afraid to walk back things that you've said out of anger. We always want our children to, if they realize they made a mistake, we want them to say, I made a mistake and I actually didn't mean that. So don't be afraid if you've, threatened something huge when your child is having a meltdown and then you're like, oh, geez, why did I say that? Don't be afraid to say, and this actually will be a deposit in the Goodwill Bank. Don't be afraid to say, you know what? When I was really angry, I said something that I didn't mean. And of course, you can go to the birthday party this weekend. We all say things that we don't mean when we get upset. And I'm sorry I said that to you. That wasn't fair. So we all want our children to recognize that they made mistakes and do a repair. How are they going to learn that if we never do it? Right. So those are some things that are withdrawals from that goodwill bank. And that over time, you will find that, I use the party example. I'm running short on time, so I won't go into a ton of detail, but, my daughter, who's in grade 12, senior in high school, last year, she wanted to go to a party, and it was when my husband and I were going to be out of town. She didn't know the person very well who was having the party, and none of her friends were going. And when she told me all three of those things, I said, it doesn't sound like a great idea. If one of those things were different, I guess I'm telling the whole story. If one of those things were different, that would sound great. If daddy and I were in town and we could be back up if you needed anything, or if your friends were all going, or if you knew the person really well. But because of all those reasons, it just doesn't seem smart. And she said, you know what, Mom, you're right. I'm not going to go. And she didn't go. Her brother was staying here with her while we were away. She probably could have snuck out, but because that goodwill bank is nice and beefy, she trusted me. She trusted that I had her best interests at heart. And also it helped that I didn't forbid her. I just talked to her about it. No matter how connected you are with a person, often giving an order will activate their counter will. So if I had said, you're not going to the party, she might have said, I am going. So, I was careful to tell her my concerns rather than forbid her for going. Okay, we're down to our last two. So Corey, I think you all know Corey, who works with me. She was just telling me one of her children is an extreme picky eater, like to the point where they had fallen off their growth curve. And her doctor and she and her doctor were worried about her child. He has some sensory issues. And even though she's been being a peaceful parent, his whole life and doing all the things you're supposed to do for picky eating, like not putting pressure, having safe foods, all of those, she was following all the best practices. She still was having a very hard time feeding her child enough for him to grow. And so she hired a picky eating specialist. If anyone wants the name, let me know and I can get it from Corey. I think we're going to have her on the podcast because Corey was just so over the moon with this person and how much they helped her family. So she hired this woman, and she said they just finished working with her. And she said that it was like life changing and that her son made so much progress. And this interesting thing, this person also included Corey's son in the process, which I think was really great. And Corey said, I think what made the difference, she said, I didn't actually learn any new strategies. I still was doing all the things that I knew to do. She said the big difference was somebody had took the weight off my shoulders. This person that I was working with, Corey felt held by this person and felt that she didn't have to do it all by herself anymore. And that she was really felt very, so if you know somebody, you might know, maybe you have a parent that was naturally peaceful or, in-law or someone, or maybe it's somebody that you know and you admire their parenting style. I know my husband's aunt, her youngest is probably 30. So before I had children, I watched her mothering, and she was the most loving, nurturing mother. And I realized after I had kids that I really looked up to her and how she mothered. And the other interesting thing, just as a sidebar, is that she got a lot of criticism within the family for being too soft. But what I recognized in her was how nurturing she was and how loving she was with her kids. And her kids turned out great. She wasn't too soft. She just wasn't doing conventional parenting. And so if you can find a mentor, somebody who can, that you can talk to, that you can, even if it could be somebody in a book or a movie or somebody that you don't even know. It could be somebody, after I've just trashed social media, maybe there is somebody that you know. It could be coaching if you're interested in coaching. And that's actually, I want to be careful to tell you that's not why I put this slide in, because, we have clients and this is not a pitch for you to hire us privately. But that is something that I feel I am a mentor to the parents that I work with. So finding a mentor is something that, or even, even this is slightly different, but even a listening partner, if you're interested in what that is, look up Hand in Hand listening partners, and they have some guidelines for how to find a listening partner. My point is, doing this alone can be really tough. My last slide, find a community. Again, I will tell you about my Peaceful Parenting membership community, but finding a community is really important. If you feel like you're the only one who's doing this freaky, fringy, no punishment, not adult-centric way of parenting, it can feel really lonely. And again, when I was talking about that anxiety that comes in and that doubt, if you're the only one doing it, and especially if you're getting any sort of blowback from I know my aunt felt, well, my husband's aunt felt alone and criticized by the family. Luckily, she did have a community where she lived, but she felt like kind of alone and criticized by the family because no one understood what she was doing. So if you're in the position where people don't understand what you're doing, that is something that you might find a community is really helpful for. I'm going to tell you about so a community, whether maybe you have them, I don't know what they call them anymore, but they used to be like community chat boards or message boards. There was one for Mothering Magazine when my kids were younger that I found helpful to connect with other people. So maybe it's a school community, church community, virtual community, neighborhood community, but really try to find a community of people who are also practicing peaceful parenting. I'm going to tell you about my Peaceful Parenting membership, and then we're going to take questions. So this is my Peaceful Parenting membership. I'm going to just go through real quick what it is. So this is actually a screenshot from the portal. The portal that you had, if you were in the challenge, it's a similar kind of portal where you log in. And when, I mentioned the tools, the Peaceful Parenting tools, we didn't talk about that much in the challenge or today, but we do have a lot when you join the membership, there's a library of peaceful parenting lessons that you can refer to that go over the tools and the big ideas of peaceful parenting. I should have changed this slide. This is old. We actually have twice weekly group coaching hours. We used to only have once a week, but people have different schedules, and I really wanted to be available to people. Mayor, if you're still on the call, I think that's your head on the top left here with the chandelier. And I really wanted this to be available to people, to have this drop in. It's drop in. So, they're twice a week for an hour each, but you don't have to join at the top of the hour and stay for the whole time. You can come in, ask a question, and then go. The members, I've had this membership for 5 years, 5.5 years now. We started in July of 2019, actually coming up to 6, I guess. And there are people who've been in the membership from the beginning. And, it becomes a community, people who know each other. I know everybody's kids, people who come to office hours. I know your kids' names. I know their ages. I ask you about, how did that thing turn out last week? I keep waiting for Doug to come back. He's a dad in Spain who is in our membership. And he had told me that one of his children was having a 3-day birthday party sleepover. I keep waiting for Doug to come back and tell me I've been dying to know how the 3-day sleepover went. I told him he was completely insane for doing that, but I hope it went well. So we really do get to know each other, and I answer your questions, and you also give each other your support and things that have helped you as well. We have monthly content on a theme. This is old. You can see this is from 2020, 2021, where we choose a theme. We go deeper on that theme. Often we have a guest expert on the theme who comes in if it's something that's outside of my, area of expertise. This month we're doing siblings. And I also want to just mention that the workshop that you may have seen come by that I'm running on March 20th, that workshop is a membership workshop. So if you're in the membership, that's included. So we do a training or a workshop on the theme, and we have materials, handouts, cheat sheets on the theme. And this month there's no guest expert because I'm running it. But next month we're doing aggression. Tasha Shore is the guest expert, and she's going to be answering your questions about aggression. And we're going to have, a lot of lessons for you about how to handle aggression and lessen it. May, we're going to be doing mindfulness for parents. That's something that I'm not very good at. And so we've never done it before, but I found a great guest expert who specializes in helping parents with mindfulness, which is basically, another way of talking about working on self-regulation. I already mentioned the experts. I'm just going to move on. We have a private Facebook community where if you can't make the office hours, I will answer your questions inside the Facebook community, inside the Facebook group. If you're not on Facebook, this is the only thing that you won't get to be part of. Although there are people who have started like a dummy account just so that they can be part of this community. I wish there was a better alternative that didn't support Meta, but there isn't one right now. If you know one, please tell me. But it is a nice way to connect with other people and get answers to your questions if you can't make office hours. This is how much it is. It's $37 a month or $370 for the year. If you do the yearly price, that's 2 months for free. Just hopping back in here to say that was the end of the workshop, and we moved on to a Q&A, which was a really great Q&A, but because of privacy reasons, I'm not going to share the Q&A here. If you would like to join the membership, please go to reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership and join us. We would love to have you inside our membership. Corey and I are always talking about how it's our favorite part of what we do, and it's a really special corner of the internet, and I would love to see you inside. reimaginepeacefulparenting.com/membership and get locked in at the current low price before we raise it after April 5th. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. I hope you found this conversation insightful and exactly what you needed in this moment. Be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Remember that I'm rooting for you. I see you out there showing up for your kids and doing the best you can. Sending hugs over the airwaves today. Hang in there. You've got this.